All right, K&W fans, I'm going to try to do another one of these videos for how I do stuff on my railroad. And today we're going to talk about doing ballast. I don't do it any different really than a lot of people. It's probably pretty standard, but if you're curious on how I do a particular task, then you're about to find out. First of all, what I'm starting with is this is the Royal Gorge route, Tennessee Pass area. So I've done a lot of research, as much as I can do, based on YouTube videos and Google Earth and so on, to try to determine a ballast look. And what I've come up with is this blend that you can see here. And it's obviously pretty multicolored, but as far as I can tell, so is the prototype. So what this is, and I'll show you here, this is a combination. I use this Woodland Scenics fine ballast gray blend, and they're all fine blends. Usually if you're shopping for ballast, you see three different levels. If you fine grade, medium grade, and large, or whatever the other one is that I think is typically used for O. I stick with fine, and that's because I saw a article or a comment on a forum, I'm not sure, where somebody actually compared the medium grade to an HO scale figure, and the medium grade ballast was almost the same size as the HO scale person's head. So I am trying to stick as much to scale as I can, so that's why I'm going with all fine ballast. Some people may not like the look, may think it looks too much like just sand, but that's what I've chosen to do. Anyway, so I got this gray blend here, and then this is all Woodland Scenics product until the end. And I've got this fine brown, this fine light gray here, and this fine dark brown that are all blended in, and then some of this that I got at Hobbytown, this fine buff, and that bag had a bunch of holes, so I had to find a container. And actually, I recommend getting containers for all these bags because it doesn't take much to punch a hole and then it's leaking everywhere. And there's your example. Anyway, so no really rhyme or reason to how I blended this up. I did start with a decent amount of the fine ballast there, the gray blend, sorry. And then I just poured small amounts of the others, probably equal. And then I covered the lid on, shook it up really well, and this is the color that I came up with, and I like this the best. I might add a little bit more of the buff tone, a little bit lighter tone, but even though I'm going to use this multicolored ballast, I'm still going to go back and weather it, whether it's add oil stains or dust or whatever, maybe use some powders. I've seen lots of good methods out there, so I'm going to do that as well, but I thought I would start with this blend. All right. As for tools, I use this simple tester's brush, and it's got the kind of thicker, wider head. This, when it spreads out a little bit, it's almost perfectly the width of an HO scale rail scale between rails. So that's why I use that. And then I just have a laundry detergent scoop here, which I probably could use a smaller one. This is just one I happen to come up with for now. And then I also have just a water bottle here with a fine spray mist. I think my wife found this at Walmart in the makeup aisle. Or actually, I think it was in the cheap goods aisle for like flying at airports. Anyway, there are some drops of detergent in there to kind of help that water permeate through the ballast once it's down. And then I have just a simple Elmer's glue bottle here, because the applicator works just as well as an eyedropper as far as I'm concerned. And it's about a 50-50 blend of Elmer's glue and water shaken really well. So we're going to get started here. So you can see I've got my track weathered already. It's a blend of some grays, some tan, all that's been kind of dry brushed on, and then a light layer of rust dry brushed on top of that. You can see some of the black ties there. We're going to recall this line has been recently repaired with some ties that have been replaced. So I have some pretty good flat black ties there. And I've also, before I did all that, I painted a good rust color by hand on the rail webbing and caught as much of the tie plates as I could. So you can see all the different colors there and the reasons for those. You can also see how the ties aren't necessarily perfectly even. Most of my mainline track, I didn't mess with the ties too much, figuring that it was in pretty decent shape. But on a lot of my sidings and spurs, I did mess with the ties a little bit to make them not so even, because obviously they're older and not maintained as well. So that's the purpose for that. But we're going to start here by getting a scoop of ballast, not a bunch. We're going to start small. And then basically what I'll do is I'll just pour it right down the middle of the tracks without making too much of a mess here. And I always work with the principle that you can always add more, but it's harder to clean too much. So we'll probably just start with that there. And then I'll use my brush, spread it out as best I can. And this is super fun trying to do while looking at the camera. And then ideally what I would do is I would have enough ballast poured in the middle that when I brush it down the middle of the tracks like this, it pours over the sides and is sufficient to cover the ends of the ties. You can see here, I didn't quite pour enough. And I like to do it down the middle because it tends to spread more evenly over the sides. So we're gonna pour a little bit more. Like I said, it's easier to add more than it is to clean up a big mess. We'll see how that looks. There you see how it's pouring over the rails onto the edge or outer edge of the ties. And then when I do this, I don't do a huge section at once before I go ahead and glue it down. And that's in case I end up having to quit in the middle for some reason, or who knows, whatever reason. That way, what I've laid is definitely glued, so I don't come back and mess it up somehow, sneeze on it. I've done that before. That was a huge mess. So as you can see, and this track is sitting on HO scale cork, so there's quite a bit of an embankment, a road bed that I have to also cover. And then while I'm trying to smooth this out, I'm doing the best that I can to get as much of it off the ties and off the rail webbing, because once I spray that water even, it'll start to stick there. And then obviously once I drop the glue, it'll definitely stick there. It's not the end of the world. Obviously you can go back and clean that off with a flathead screwdriver or a knife or whatever, but obviously it's a lot easier if you get as much of it off there beforehand as possible. So I'm getting close to being done with this little section. You can see where there are some darker areas showing, like right here, where I haven't quite gotten the ballast to cover the road bed. You can see the road bed's really dark because I did an overall spray job on the track as it was laid down, and that was to give a good general color, dark color for everything, so it would be easier to go back and paint over and then hopefully not miss any bright spots or have any sheen left from just the plastic molding process. So that's why everything is dark. But you can also see it's kind of showing through. Well, two things. One, you can always go back and do this again. Once this is glued, you can always add more and glue it down on top. So I'm not too worried about fixing every single hole right off the bat. But also, it could just be the earth underneath and you just have a hole of ballast. There's just a spot that the maintenance away people need to come back and fill. Who knows? So that's part of the reason why I paint it, so it's not just, obviously cork underneath that you can see. So I'm going to continue to dress this up just for another minute or two. All right, I've got the ballast shoulders and the center done pretty well. So I'm really just going through now and just trying to get some of those few last specks off of the top of the ties and off the rail webbing. Again, I'm not trying to necessarily be perfect, but this doesn't take but about a minute or so. So I'm just going to do what I can to clean this up a little bit. And remember, you don't have to have the ballast perfectly level with the ties. It's okay to have the ballast dip down a little bit between the ties. That's prototypical, especially on older lines where they don't maintain it as often. Ballast over time will just kind of settle in place. So if there are a little bit of dips between each tie, that's okay. All right, I've moved my camera back a little bit here because I'm about to spray some water, and obviously I don't want to get any foam or don't want to get any water on my camera. So I've got this section, and I'm just going to do a better overview here. You can see how it looks. It's just a small section, haven't done a whole lot, so I'm basically going to focus on trying to get this area wet and glued, and then I'll come back and do some more. But just for today's purposes, I'm just trying to show an example of how I do it. So we'll just do this little section. And it's definitely important to get a very fine spray mister, otherwise the water will pool or it'll actually blast the ballast out of place. So this is just very gentle spray mixture, or just a light action until it's definitely really wet. And you can kind of use the surrounding areas to tell if it's wet enough. And you'll find out real quick too if you start laying the glue and it just rolls right off it. All right, so now we'll start some gluing. Definitely make sure you shake up your glue bottle really well to make sure that blend, that 50-50 blend, is as close as possible. You can always go back and do more, but you won't know you need it until the next day after it's either dried hard or not. And then what I like about using the Elmer's bottle is you can adjust how much comes out by obviously just twisting the top. And then I'm just going to start at one end and work my way down, opening this enough until it starts to drip, and I'll start in the middle. And you're basically just trying to make everything white to make sure you get enough glue everywhere. And it looks horrible. The first time I did this ever in my life, I thought, this can't be right. I'm putting glue on everything and it's just going to be all white. Well, it's not the case. Once it dries, you won't see any of the white. And with the water spray, all that gluey water, I guess, mixture just filters right down into the ballast and amongst it, and it just blew my mind that it actually holds that all hard and solid. All right, we're going to stop there, and then we'll come back here in the foreground and do this first. And even though I haven't got this completely covered yet, I'm going to go ahead and glue down what's there. And then this is the part where you want to be kind of careful on how much glue you apply, because if you do too much, it'll just wash out your shoulder, your ballast shoulder, and it'll just kind of run down like a river and you'll lose your shape. It's not the end of the world if that happens. You can go back and you can adjust it by even just using your finger or a screwdriver or something, just kind of reshape it if you want, but you can also just come back and add more. It's not that big a deal. All right, and then we'll do the back. Now, if the track that I was doing was on a higher embankment and there was more of a longer pitch down to ground level, what I would do, I've seen other people do this, is I would use Mod Podge or even just this white glue, and I would spread it on that incline with a brush and make it very good coverage, make sure it's nice and flat, smooth, I guess. And then I would put the ballast on top of the glue so that it creates, I guess, a catch surface. So when I do more ballast on top, it all doesn't just slide down to the bottom. So that's how I would handle that. All right, well, that's all the glue that needs to be applied for now. Basically what I do at this point is I have to wait. I can go ahead and add more ballast on another section and keep working on that, or I can just let this sit overnight and see how I like it. But for the most part, that's it. Wait about 24 hours to test the hardness of the ballast. If it's not hard, then add some more glue and it should work just fine, and just keep on trucking. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching.